Good afternoon and welcome to the Citizens Advisory Committee. It is June 6th and we are going to be meeting, but we're going to start with our land acknowledgement.
Yes, we are. We acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Snohomish people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes as well. Since the immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and the water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society.
Thank you, Samantha.
Of course.
So I'll just start with some overall procedures. And first I'll introduce myself. I'm Vicki Dorway. I'm Community Development Specialist. And so during this Citizen Advisory Committee public meeting, there is not going to be formal public comments for the action item being addressed during today's meeting. But those wanting to connect with staff can email me at Dorway, which is DORWAY, at everettwa.gov. The public can access this meeting through various ways. There's the Everett TV channel. There's Everett's YouTube channel. You can call in and the public call-in number at 1-425-616-3920. And the conference ID number is 724-887-726, hashtag, also known as a #. You can access the hearing online via the Microsoft Teams meeting link on the Citizens Advisory page, and that is at everettwa.gov. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chair Martin.
Hey. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm Michelle Martin, and I'm the current chair, chairing our first meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee, and this is my second year on the committee. So what I'd like to do first is to call roll and go from there. All right, Christina Ahu. Okay, Matt Bissell.
Here.
Cindy Bonner.
Here.
Josh Bruner.
Here.
Chris Dingle.
Here.
Molly Eberhardt. And Molly is excused today. Samantha Hassan.
Here.
And then myself, Michelle Martin, and Susan Mosshart. And Susan is excused today. Michael O'Gorman.
Here.
Okay. All right. And now I'd like to ask staff to introduce themselves. So we had
Vicki Dorway and
Kimber Landry, Community Development Manager.
Becky McCrary, I'm the Long Range Planning Manager.
Thank you. So what I want to do is kind of share a little bit about our procedure today. So we're having what is called a complex hybrid approach. So if you have something that you would like to address the committee with, you please raise your hand on Teams, on the video, and raise your hand in the room. Okay. So with that, I'm going to call on staff. We have Becky McCrary, who's going to give us a presentation on the Everett 2044 plan.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. And I'm pleased to be here today. I'm Becky McCrary. I'm the Long Range Planning Manager for the city. And I felt that this committee was a really important committee to bring this information to, and hope that you will be able to stay engaged in this process because it will affect some of the work that you're doing in your committee. So what Everett 2044 is an update to our comprehensive plan. And our comprehensive plan is really the roadmap for how the city grows how buildings or where buildings are built, and we take a 20-year look. Next slide. So the current plan that we're under is the 2015 to 2035 plan. And there have been a number of things that have occurred, and we're required to update our plan periodically, and we're at that point. So what we'll do is we'll extend that planning period, again, 20 years. So it'll be 2024 to 2044. Did I say that right? That's hard to say. So we're extending the horizon. We're also, since we updated the plan, we have some new state laws that have come into place. We want to make sure our plans are consistent with that. We have a number of other plans and policies in the region that apply to Everett that we need to update. And kind of why I'm here today is the public participation. It needs to be very broad, and we want to reach as many people as we can because this is the future of Everett. And then we will also embark on an environmental impact analysis or environmental review through this process. Next slide. I'm just going to talk about key questions, which is at the end, talk about how we're presenting what we call growth scenarios or alternatives for how the city might grow. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of information. I'll go pretty fast, but I think the main thing is I hope I get your interest and that you'll want to stay engaged. Next slide. So the context is right now the city has about 50,000 housing units. In our 2035 plan, we were supposed to plan for about a total of 70,000 units. So another 30,000 or 20,000 units. Yes, 20,000 units by 2035. When we did the analysis back in 2021, it shows that we didn't quite have enough capacity. So we've got a little bit of a shortfall just to meet what we call our growth targets for 2035. So we'll have to address that in our 2044 update. So our new target for 2044 is about 85,600 housing units, if you can believe that. So that's our new target out to 2044, that there will be that many housing units. So that's not population because household sizes are different, but to accommodate that, the population that we expect to come, it will be that many housing units. Right now, we have about room for 21,000 more new housing units. So we've got to find room for about 17,000 more units. That's a lot of units. So it's not quite half again, but and so what you see on the chart there, those colored bars, is this year we're required to plan our housing to make sure that we're allowing the housing units that would be affordable to all income levels. In the past, we haven't really had to do that. So all the way from shelters to permanent supportive housing to non-supportive housing, and then also on the higher end, believe it or not, Everett has less of the higher end housing, and will, in order to balance the housing in the community, that we would need more higher end housing, and then also on the very low end, the 0 to 30 area median income housing that's going to be needed. Any questions? That's a lot of information, but that sets the context for why we're really doing this.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, question.
How are, or what are the approaches to engage more of the community on these decisions?
I have a slide on public participation. Could I save that to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And was there another question?
Yes, Christopher Dingle had a question.
Yeah, I'm just curious if you can speak at all to how changes at the state legislative level with missing middle housing and some of the different bills that came out this last session, how that's impacting this plan, or if it's calculated into this at all.
That's a very great question, and it's going to come up here in just a few minutes if I can ask you to hold on for just a second. Thank you. Next slide.
Sorry, wrong focus on the wrong area. There we go.
Okay.
Great.
This is those charts that actually show the numbers. So in terms of, on the left is housing need now and about what we have that's on the left. On the right is what we'll need in 2044. And in the middle is the difference. Actually, the city has enough housing for that 30 to 80% in that middle income area. We already have a lot of that housing. So that's why I say that it's the upper end housing and the lower end housing that the city needs to focus on to balance what the community needs are. Next slide. I wanted to show you what that looks like in real life in terms of affordability. So this is the Nimbus, which is just downtown that was just built. And this was about a month and a half ago. There, a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit was about $2,770 a month. And a person would need to make about 95% of AMI to afford that unit, or $100,000. Next slide, annually. Here's the Dorn apartments, if you know where those are. This is also a 2-bedroom. Doesn't say if there's an extra bathroom, but that might be for 3 people. That would be about affordable to a person making 60% AMI, about $75,000. Next slide. And here's a 60,000 AMI. Again, about 70,000. That's a newly remodeled duplex unit, and $1,695 a month for that unit. Next slide. When you talk about home ownership, this is a house that is $485,000. It's a 3-bedroom. It's not huge. And a person would need to make that 100% AMI in order to afford that and not pay more than 30% of their income. Next slide. So here's where the growth scenarios come in. So we created these growth geographies. So you see places where the city would go would be along those urban corridors, which are Broadway, Evergreen Way, Everett Mall Way, down there on 19th Southeast. Those are what we would consider urban corridors, and they're already zoned for, multifamily housing. Then the other area that we're identifying as potential growth areas are what we're calling the frames around those frontages. So areas where you could put some potential growth to create some transition areas towards the neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods. We're identifying Metro Everett, of course, and then there's areas, pockets around the boundary of Metro Everett that are potential for more growth. Light rail station areas, we want to acknowledge that because light rail should be here in downtown Everett by 2041. So that's within this planning period. So it's very important that we're in front of what happens as the Everett light rail gets to downtown. Then we have, we're not calling them east-west connectors so much, but connectors that generally run east-west, that are larger roads that might be able to handle more growth along them. And then all of the rest of the residential neighborhoods. Special areas are like Riverfront. They have a special master plan development. There is the waterfront. And the other place would be Baker Heights, which is now Park District.
Yeah.
We're identifying that also as we know they're in a process, although we don't know the outcome of that. I'm not going to focus on employment areas, although that's our charge as well. Employment areas, we won't be expanding the areas themselves, but we will be looking at ways that we can increase growth potentials in the current employment areas. And I'm thinking around the industrial area, Southwest industrial area, and also along the corridors. Next slide.
And Becky, before you continue, it looks like Chris has a question.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Chris.
No worries at all. I'm sorry. This might be in a later slide, but I'm curious if you can speak to how how many blocks away from, say, Evergreen, as an example of one of the frames
Right.
that you're talking about here. How does that extend?
It's about
Yeah.
it's about a block. It's about maybe 500 feet.
Okay.
Maybe about that.
Okay.
Right now, it's sort of a concept boundary. We certainly haven't drawn around individual parcels at this point, but just as a way to analyze and figure out where we have room and what makes sense.
Okay. And then is there potentially an opportunity to get this overlaid on top of, I'm just terrible at trying to figure out exactly kind of where I'm at on this. Is there
Sure.
another copy that might have more streets or just major streets on there to get an idea?
We are going to be posting an interactive map, and I will make sure that Vicki and Kimbra get a link to that.
Ed.
Perfect. Next slide. So now we're going to talk a little bit about housing types. So if you see a zoning map, you'll see that the predominant zoning in Everett is single family. And this comes back to your question, Chris, about the middle housing bill that just came out. And in fact, the staff, we got a grant last year to explore middle housing for Everett. And we were in the process of doing that when House Bill 1110 passed. So we're acknowledging that in that neighborhood residential typology, the detached housing, the townhouse, the sack flats, cottage. So in that graphic, you see the single family, then you see that middle housing piece, which is a little bit more than the single family, plexes, courtyard apartments, and then of course your mid and high rise. And you'll see it on the maps, then it'll make more sense. But then the low rise, the mid rise, and the high rise. This is a way for us to categorize housing types and then understanding what incomes they would most likely accommodate, households that they would accommodate. Next slide. So our alternatives, just trying to make a spread between them so we can study the different impacts of everything. We want to try to make something that's reasonably achievable. As I said, focused on housing growth, and we're looking for 38,000 new housing units between 2024 and 2044. Slide. So I do have slides that show these individually, but I just wanted to show you them together to show you that they are different. The first alternative, next slide. Oh,
Want to go back?
this is just in a graphic form, so you can go skip that one. We'll come back if we need to. Alternative one, it's really our current plans. Now we know that isn't gonna meet all of our requirements, but it just becomes a baseline from which we can study the other alternatives. So that would be, again, right now our housing capacity existing is along those urban corridors. It's in the Metro Everett. We would increase it slightly because remember we had that gap to 2035. And then in this scenario, we would acknowledge those future light rail station areas. And that would only give us, though, 21,000 new housing units. Next slide. The second alternative, it just feeds off of the first alternative. So it puts more growth along those urban corridors. And it does, however, add the frames so we can add some more density behind the higher density in the urban corridors. Again, serving as that transition between urban corridors and the neighborhood residential. I want to point out that this alternative doesn't address middle housing, but we do know we're going to have to address middle housing because House Bill 1110 says we have to allow it. However, alternative 2 still gives us, we were already way down the road on this work when that bill passed. So when it comes to finding a preferred alternative, it will be probably a hybrid or a combination of what pieces perform the best out of each alternative. However, this alternative would get us to our 38,000 new housing units. Next slide. Alternative 3, however, it does continue the growth along the urban corridors, adds some smaller growth to the frames, but it distributes more of the middle housing out to all of the neighborhoods. That's basically what the House Bill 1110 says you should do. So this alternative does address that particular one. I think the other bill that we have to address is around accessory dwelling units. I'm certain that we'll be addressing that particular bill before we even get to the end of this project, because we already had that bill in front of the council for consideration, or we will have that in there in front of them for consideration in the next couple months. And our proposal basically what the state law says and passed. So that gets us to our 38,000. Next slide. So what we're doing right now, I'm almost done, is we're out asking the community, are these the right growth scenarios that we should be studying? We've already been to the public earlier, we got some feedback, we built these alternatives, want to know, did we get this right? Or do you have some changes that you think we should do before we start doing our environmental impacts analysis? Next slide. And here's all the activity that we have going this month. And I will pass out to those of you that are here. everettwa.gov/2044 is the website, and you will find a lot of information on there. You can sign up to receive notices, but we feel like it's really important to try and engage with the community and get your feedback. So there is a feedback form, survey form on there that we would love to get from you. We've got an open house next Tuesday at Everett Community College. If you want to come and visit with us, we'll have lots of boards and staff to talk more detail. And then we've scheduled some talk to a planner hours. So these are hours dedicated to this project. You can call us and go to the website and click the link at these times, and you'll be able to talk with somebody. We've also got a couple of Spanish sessions there as well. Next slide. Yeah, so we're just getting ready to launch into our phase 3, and I just really appreciate you letting me come and share this information, and hope that you will stay engaged with us. I'll probably be back around again, your next, whenever you meet in the fall, or to give you an update, because I think, you know, the housing is really tricky, especially when it comes to the income, getting the right mix of housing for our community. Yeah.
Just one question. How does, I would think Snohomish County as a whole, from the county government standpoint, would be also looking at comprehensive plans. And so I'm thinking about around the edges. So right where Everett comes up against Linwood, or comes up against unincorporated Snohomish County, how the planning might incorporate anything that's happening on the borders, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, the Snohomish County is in the process of updating their comprehensive plan as well. We are coordinating with them on that. In fact, we have a meeting on Thursday with them. We also coordinate through Snohomish County Tomorrow, which is a group of all the county and all the cities.
Oh, great.
That we stay coordinated with, because it has a lot to do with roads, you know, how our roads connect and how they function. And just, we have future annexation areas that they're planning for in now that will Sunday be in the city of Everett. So, yes, great question.
I have a question as well. I saw the agenda. It was pretty packed. But what are you guys doing to reach out to the community to let them know that these issues do need to be addressed or at least acknowledged?
Yes. We have held a number of open houses. On the back of your flyer, there's a how to get involved. We are doing social media.
Social media. Okay.
That's not all. We're showing up at pop-up events. We've been
Nice.
high school. We will be reaching out to, for example, large employers through this process, but it still is really hard to get people to be engaged with us. We've been down to Casino Road, the Connect Casino Road group down there. We would gladly give any presentations to any neighborhood associations. We've done that as well. We are going to hold a virtual open house Thursday night, and we'll record that and get it up on here too. So we would welcome any suggestions as well about how to reach out and get other people, give them the information.
Follow-up question. It seems like things will move forward no matter what. So how much engagement and or input is actually required to make these types of decisions? Because it seems like things are going to happen no matter what.
They have to move.
How big of a scale, rather? Do we need people to? Do you know that? Or maybe we can
There
figure
is-
that out in the future?
Yeah, there isn't a set, we need to have this many people or this much input. These are big decisions, and the decision makers, the planning commission and the council will be spending the next 18 months doing this. So they will be hearing all about this. They'll hopefully be hearing from the community members as well. So it's our job just to get as much public participation as we can. And for people that aren't familiar with how it works, it's hard to get them engaged. So we are translating everything into Spanish, and we will translate anything if somebody asks us in any language.
Lovely. Thank you.
So anyway, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go sign up for notices. Oh, there's another question.
Very sorry. The language question, just speaking from my neighborhood, the number of recent arrivals from Ukraine, I just highlighting that as a language that I frequently get called to make calls for them. And so I'm just saying that, highlighting that right now. You have a constituent, who's saying Ukrainian would be a really great language to consider.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's good information. Great. Feel free to reach out anytime, and be happy to share more. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Well, next up on our agenda is Vicky. And Vicky has an item for us on funding increase for an approved 2022 CDBG activity.
That's correct. And Kembra is switching to the other slide presentation. So if you want to go ahead and go to the first slide, we'll just get right into it. So first of all, we want to thank the committee and guests who have joined us today to talk about this. And what I'm going to do is provide some information about the funding increase that we are recommending for a non-public service activity, as Michelle said, that was approved for funding for the 2022 program year. And that was a roof replacement for the village on Casino Road. And so per the citizen participation plan, a change of more than 50% of the amount of CDBG funds that were originally awarded to a project does require citizen advisory committee review. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, since some of you were not on the committee when it was recommended to approve funding for this project. And then it's probably a good refresher for those of you who were on the committee. So The picture on the left is an aerial of the village on Casino Road. The village is home to 20 partner organizations who provide a continuum of services and supports where community members can receive different things like case management and navigation of resources, infant and early childhood mental health counseling. There's an ECAP preschool, there's adult education classes, food bank services, youth development, and more. So the village is located in a low moderate income census tract area where at least 51% of the residents are at or below 80% of the HUD area median income. And the village itself predominantly serves low moderate income residents. So back in the fall of 2021, the CAC recommended that City Council approve the use of CDBG funding to replace the roof on this on the village. The picture on the right shows the current tile roof, which is over 40 years old. You can also see a little tarp that gets spread out when it rains to prevent leaks from going into the buildings. So once it was approved, so the Citizen Advisory Committee recommended funding for this project, and then it went to City Council. Once City Council approved it, then kind of there's behind the scenes stuff that staff goes through. So we worked with Child Strive, who's the building owner, and we did an environmental review. And then we also kind of made sure that the project is adhering to federal financial compliance and federal procurement standards. And so the procurement process for finding a contractor to do the work for the roof replacement just wrapped up. And if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. So when the bids were received in April, so just a couple months ago, they were quite a bit higher than when Child Strive first applied for CDBG funding in October of 2021. The original project estimates for the roof replacement were based on costs at that time. And as you probably know, both labor costs, material costs have increased significantly. Plus the full scope of work was underestimated. So at any rate, if you look closer at the numbers, the top number is the CDBG funding, $191,657 of the Everett CDBG funds. So that includes the original awarded amount of $168,000 plus an additional $23,400 to allow for an increased expense for external project management. So Child Strive has private grant funding in the amount of $278,129 for a total of just over $469,000. So the current construction bid and project cost is about $608,000. And so that leaves a difference of $138,848. So prior year CDBG funds that were uncommitted are available to cover this amount. And staff is recommending that the committee approve this funding increase for several reasons. You know, the replacement of this roof is a benefit to the community, and the roof really needs to be replaced. And delaying the project means that it likely won't be completed this year, especially since it needs to be re-roofed during the dry season, which we are now approaching. Approval of the additional funds also helps get the city closer to meeting timeliness, which is the timely expenditure of funds that's required by HUD. And we did not meet that this year. So we are wanting to get funds out the door so that we can meet timeliness for next year. So with that, I would like to open it up to see if there are any questions from the committee before handing it back over to Chair Martin.
I have a question.
Yes.
What is the square footage of this building?
The roof replacement itself is like 25,000 square feet.
Okay.
So that does include a couple of breezeways. So that's not like that might not be the whole building. There's 4 different buildings, A, B, C, and D. 2 of them are you can kind of see they're kind of co-joined, but there's breezeways. But so roughly 25,000 square feet of roofing needs to be replaced. So.
Okay.
It is a large project.
Seems like it's definitely urgent because the more time we wait or, things are delayed, then more damage can occur.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, Kimber and I toured and you can see multiple places where water drips in and they have buckets that catch water, and you can see places on the walls where the water has dripped down. And yeah, it is a definite need. And we did, originally provide funding to help with this, but as I said, the costs are a lot more than they were over a year and a half ago. So let's see, are there any questions? I'm looking to see if anyone has their hand raised. Any additional questions? Okay, well, with that, I'll turn it back over to Chair Martin.
Okay, thank you, Vicki. And so at this time, I'm seeking a motion to approve this item as described by staff, and also seeking a second to that motion. Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve staff recommendations.
Seconded.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded, and so I'd like to call the roll for the vote. Okay, Matt Bissell.
Yes.
Cindy Bonner.
Yes.
Chris Dingle.
Yes.
Samantha Hassan.
Yes.
Michelle Martin. Yes. And Michael O'Garman.
Yes.
Okay, the motion is approved.
Did we get Josh Bruner?
Oh, Josh. I'm sorry, Josh. Josh Bruner.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
My head going up and down. I'll work
That's
on
okay.
that.
No problem.
Okay, with that, the motion is approved, and I would like to turn it back to staff for your wrap up and any additional staff comments.
Great. Thank you, Chair Martin, and thank you to everybody that's joined us today. I believe we did have an agency representative on the call with us, so I just appreciate for them even showing up. Thank you. That's Terry Clark with Child's Drive. Thank you, Terry. So thank you for being available, but motion passed. So yay, yay, Child's Drive. This is a win for Child's Drive. Good job, guys.
Yeah. Thanks so much to all of you.
Thank you, Terry. Okay, so just general staff updates. In addition to all the fun things that we have going on with, you guys got this update from planning, and man, that was dense. But the main thing to really take away from that is that the focus of this committee is to support vulnerable residents as well as residents that are 80% AMI or below. So when we think about the way that this committee can help to support projects that are or ideas that were brought up in the comprehensive plan, we look at, they needed, I'm going to do a real light estimate, like 7,400 units just for the 0 to 30% AMI threshold. Let's just take a second and think about 0 to 30% means unhoused and or persons that are extremely low income, and we need 7,400 housing units and or beds for that group alone. Wow. Outside of that, then we have the 30 to 50. Becky showed us that the 30 to 50, Everett's actually meeting that fairly well. Sometimes that ends up being some of our supportive housing elements end up being within that range. And then we have 50 to 80. So we have another group of people that this committee helps us support. And that group also needs a couple thousand units for housing development. So this committee has, when it comes to how we can help support this, you guys help to allocate funds as well as helping to get needs identified and hopefully also helping to spread the word on people using the funds for persons that are under the 80% AMI threshold, of which we know there are 2 groups that can definitely benefit from the funds that you guys help to allocate. So just kind of, if there's anything to take away from what Becky presented, besides how to get involved, it's also where you guys have support for what is going to be moving forward. So thinking about those urban corridors, thinking about, you know, the areas, when we get into the consolidated plan that will start next year, it is a beast of an amount of work. We do a lot of public engagement with it. That sets our funding timeline and our projection of needs for the next 5 years. It's something to think about. Okay, are there target areas that we want to align in the consolidated plan with the comprehensive plan so that the committee is helping to put money where it's going to be most impactful, as was already determined by the citywide engagement effort done by the comprehensive plan? An example of how this kind of all ties in together. So for right now, continue to stay involved in it as you can. Continue to think about how, as we move through the funding year later, you guys can help us keep an eye out for things that would help to support these needs. And then we'll just leave it at that. And then seeing Becky hopefully again in August, which will be our next major meeting, is going to be in August to identify community needs. Stuff to think about. So we have the comprehensive plan that we just went through. Some of the regular city updates otherwise are that if anybody was paying attention to city council last week, or, you know, just the national news in general, U.S. Treasury has taken a different approach with American Rescue Plan Act funds. And so what was allocated to help support ARPA, so ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act Fund projects, you guys helped to allocate $100,000 of ARPA funds to support human needs projects. And then ARPA funds have also helped to support pallet projects, which are the 0 to 30% AMI threshold, as well as some other COVID response projects, especially ones that are regarding social work or behavioral health projects for the city. All of those funds now are actually being allocated for general fund support from the city. So what that means is that we are no longer, as of like middle of this year, having ARPA funds to be able to use for COVID response. The city is going to use that funding instead for other emergency needs, fire and police emergency needs, and everything that was slated for ARPA funds otherwise is going to get general fund support from the city. If you have any technical questions about that, to be completely honest, I'm going to say go to the city council meeting first. Listen to that. Also, the budget committee meeting that the city council had to help direct the explanation, the presentation of that item is also available online. And then after watching that, if you have any questions, happy to help address any of the questions that you guys, but I got to tell you, our finance director did a fantastic job, and she is much more savvy with things than I am sometimes with that kind of stuff. So she's a good person to look at that. So that was just a good update for you guys to know, because you did help to allocate money under ARPA for human needs funds. Outside of that, we're continuing to move forward. We do have, like Vicki is touching on with this project, other projects that are still dealing with some, I'm going to say, residual COVID impacts. So we're finally getting into the place where we see people starting to pick up momentum with construction. With momentum with getting projects off the ground, moving things forward. Hopefully, we do not see a delay for executing construction or development contracts in the next year. But of course, you know, who knows how the market's going to go. But our hope is that we continue to move forward with the momentum that we currently have, where projects are able to get funding. They go through all the rigorous run around with us on the federal compliance side on it for environmental and everything else. And then they actually get their project going as, you know, like the next year kind of thing. So in the spring, after you guys then award everything. That's what we'd hope, is that continues to move forward. And in that case, then we do meet timeliness like next year. As Vicki mentioned, we did just get an update from HUD in the last month that yes, we did not meet timeliness threshold on May 2nd. We had a little bit of residual funds, but that's also where you guys help to step in and allocate the extra funds to support city projects. I do have a quick update on that. We have worked with transit, library, facilities, and Parks Department. And right now, funds are probably going to go forward and definitely support. There's a lot of transit development projects that are within, as Vicki mentioned, low mod areas. So they're in census tracts that are low or moderate concentration of persons. We're going to help to focus on a lot of transit development for that, bus shelters, bus stops, things like that, as well as probably helping to pick up some of the efforts that Parks has. Some of the other projects that are going on are either too far in their progress, so they're not even eligible for federal funding, unfortunately, because of nuances. And as well as also some of the projects need more money than actually what's available, which is good to think about for us in the future if we ever run into this issue again. But is where we're at. We're probably going to look at you guys. We'll probably be able to drive around and start seeing bus shelters pop up in certain areas. And you guys get to have a little nice, like, you helped to do that. So next year we won't run into so much of a timeliness issue because you got the funds committed to Child's Tribe and you got the funds to help support city projects. And so that helps us in our expenditure for that. Outside of that, I believe everything else is continuing to move forward fairly well. We will, effective July 1st, have everything going into Amplifund for all the federal and the state projects. And so you guys in the next few months should be able to look back on how projects are actually spending in Amplifund. We did have a bit of a hiccup the city was going to use a online agreement contract software. We've decided that that's not a good path forward. The system's not quite ready as where we thought it would be. But that has nothing to affect Amplifund. It just means that we were hoping to get things moving a little bit faster with some internal efficiency for projects to be able to immediately pick up and go forward. And instead, it's the same as it has been. So good news, bad news on that one. Stays the same. Got to wait for a little bit more efficiency on that. Outside of that, continue to keep your Amplifund account active. Hopefully everybody has a great summer and we will hopefully then see everybody again in August. And to that, Chair, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you very much for the update. And I would now ask for a motion to close.
Motion to close.
Thank you, Samantha.
Of course.
Can I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned, I think. Great. I don't think we had to vote on that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.